Leigh is going to finish up the webinar with a quick talk on social media to drive behavior change.
Can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. So in order to put my presentation in context, I'm going to just explain what the Don't Move Firewood campaign is about. Hopefully some of you are familiar with it. But what we do is we provide a framework of messages and professional connectivity to decrease the movement of invasive forest pests on contaminated firewood. It's an extremely tricky problem because the regulations and messages surrounding forest pests in contaminated firewood are not, they're not the same across the United States. And so Don't Move Firewood is the central point for all of the different communications and a clearinghouse for all the different regulations throughout North America. We do include Canada in our efforts. So that's a little bit of background as to the scope of what we do. And what we're ultimately trying to do, you see, here we go, is encourage through a vast variety of different techniques people to not move firewood. Now, the campaign's run by the Nature Conservancy, my employer, through federal funds from USDA APHIS, and that's me in a bug costume on the right. And we have tons and tons of partners throughout North America, and pictured on the left is a gentleman, Alex Weiss, in Tennessee, showing off his new billboard that was part of the campaign. So that gives you an idea of the scope, from costumes to billboards. So we have two basic objectives that drive everything we do. We have conservation objectives that are the ultimate on-the-ground results that we want to see, which is lowering the spread of invasive forest pests, which in turn will maintain tree health and decrease the chance that invasive species lead to tree species functional extinction. That's sort of, we don't want to see the next Dutch elm disease hitting North America, and that's the shorthand term for what we're trying to avoid. In terms of the behavioral objectives, how do we reach those conservation objectives? It's through changing people's behavior. We have our dominant behavior, which is that we want to decrease the long-distance movement of firewood. And then we have our three replacement behaviors: increasing safe firewood, increasing local firewood, and increasing the gathering when that's permitted and appropriate, which obviously gathering firewood is not always permitted nor not always appropriate, but sometimes it is. So that's what I do all the time, is these things. Now, this is a really amazing piece of information that you all should take a minute to look at. It is, what does the public actually think in terms of how much they trust the following messengers for information about forests? So this applies to you all just as well as it applies to me, because forests is not, this is not a forest pest question, this is a forest question. Now, the number one group of people they think are very believable or somewhat believable, those two green categories, are park rangers. Hilariously, when you do some research onto what a park ranger is, it's actually somebody in a funny hat. That's what the public sees. That's what they think. They don't actually really understand the concept of a park ranger the same way that a professional would, which is borne out by the fact that the U.S. Forest Service is the second most trusted resource for information regarding forests. And so it's almost essentially interchangeable with park rangers. Now, I think this really speaks to Karunya's presentation about how homeowners trust each other, but also trust each other to sort of correct poor information. They are the third most trusted resource. Then when you get down to the fourth and fifth and sixth, et cetera, you start seeing, you know, trusted messengers that are just a little bit underneath the level of a park ranger or the Forest Service itself. So when you all interact with the public and tell them things about protecting forests, they really trust you to be providing solid information, and they take that information to heart, much more so than maybe the vocal minority would lead you to believe. So this is sort of pat yourself on the back. They really do trust us. Let me open up my chat box because I just realized it's closed. And I want to make sure if anybody wants to interrupt me, please interrupt me through the chat box, and I'll keep my eye on it and I'll respond to any questions. I intentionally made this presentation a little short to make sure I had extra time for questions, so just go ahead and do it. Okay, The next slide, for my particular tricky problem, which is who is moving firewood so far that it represents an issue for invasive species? The answer is that younger people do it. That seems to be driven by the fact that younger people have less money and people perceive buying firewood on site as being the cheaper option, and so that might be driving this trend. But knowing that our demographic is predominantly younger people, less so older people, helps us inform our decisions for targeting of the messages about firewood as an issue. Now, Mark kicks in that he's seen some surveys that indicate firefighters are most trusted messengers. I would completely believe that. It was not on our survey as one of the options. I bet that they are even more trusted than the park rangers, i.e. people in hats. So thank you for contributing that. Now, with the ever-increasing use of social media, the start of the Don't Move Firewood campaign, which was launched in 2008, we chose to target those younger people with Facebook and MySpace, which at the time was a solid choice. Now the MySpace is laughable, but you can see that at the time that dark navy blue line was really far higher than everything but the nearest line, which was only not even halfway to it. So the 30 to 49 demographic wasn't even half the users of social media when we launched in 2008. Now, the medium blue line of 30 to 49-year-old people has almost caught up with the youngest demographic. Now, part of that is that literally some of these people have jumped demographics. So in 2008, they were 6 years younger, and some of them have moved up into the next rank. But the majority of that is because everyone is using social media more, and everyone is easier to reach on this platform than ever before due to the ubiquity of cell phones, smartphones, as opposed to traditional cell phones. Tablets as a concept, tablets basically didn't exist on the mass market until midway through this graph for wide use. Now it seems like everybody and their kid has one. So all of these things are changing through time. And again, I get a lot of my data through Pew Internet because I feel like it's a reputable source, so it's cited at the bottom. Now, with the particular issue that I look at, which is firewood compliance in terms of people bringing firewood if it's close sourced to where they're bringing it to, or not bringing it if it's sourced from far apart, one of the most interesting things is that the expectation of what their friends think they should do drives a lot of their behavior. So when you ask people, why did you make the choice to buy local firewood, the thing that they say, the one thing that they say that the Nature Conservancy or any other messenger could actually influence is what their friends are expecting them to do, which is a little crazy. It's essentially saying that everyone who goes camping is a 13-year-old and is, prone to crumbling under peer pressure with regards to their firewood purchasing. So knowing that piece of information, that the peer pressure aspect of this particular choice is really high, we take that and we incorporate that peer pressure into as much messaging as we possibly can. And this is a full listing of the choices of the predictive variables. So I don't know if this information exists, and maybe, Emily, we could address this in a different setting, but knowing why people make the choices to adapt fire-wise behaviors, et cetera, would be really informative for that sort of outreach message for everybody involved. Like, why do they make the right choice, and how can you encourage them to continue doing it? So we tell our friends. Now, Don't Move Firewood engages the public most strongly through Facebook and Twitter, so I've got some examples of those platforms coming up. So, okay, sorry, I just got distracted by Annie putting up some great information, but I'm going to let that go for a minute. So the two pictures that you see are social media posts that had high engagement, and you can see at the bottom we have had good luck in getting more and more Facebook likes through time. We're actually way above that number now. It's a little out of date. We're 5,500 plus now. and we usually reach at least 1,000 people in a week. And then in terms of Twitter, we have a largely professional Twitter following, so Forest Service, et cetera, and we have close to 2,000 followers and close to 2,000 reach in most high-quality tweets. So these are examples of engaging images coupled with wording that encourages positive behaviors. See the next one. This is a postcard that people can download for free, and I just wanted to show it because the number 3 bullet on here that says under to protect future generations of trees is again that encouraging of family and friends not to move firewood. All of our materials then also point to a central site. You all have multiple central sites that you can point to, whether it's the new FAC site or Fire Adapted Communities or whatever you choose. And then keeping an eye on those analytics and how much traffic is being driven into those could be really helpful. Our personal website has about 16,000 sessions a month right now, which is pretty darn good for an independent website. And so, you know, looking at how people are reaching our website is important to determining whether or not our continued social media presence is valuable. And in fact, for us, it is. I also wanted to show this great graphic that was done by a woman in Wisconsin, Andrea, showing the impact of outreach. So sometimes it feels a little bit like you're just shouting into the wilderness with outreach in terms of, is this really effective? Are we really getting the message across in a way that changes behaviors or that encourages people to actually take an action that you want them to take? And I feel like that's an incredibly important question. The Nature Conservancy's ability to get good answers for this right now is a little constrained just due to lack of funding. As you probably all know, it's very difficult to use federal funds in order to poll the public because of OMB rules. So we need private funds in order to do that. Now, Andrea in Wisconsin, she's very lucky. She has her own funding source, and she's been polling the public every year since 2006 when her firewood outreach started in earnest in terms of getting the residents of Wisconsin that use state parks, that was just the demographic she targeted, to stop moving firewood long distances. So she started out and she was seeing people moving large amounts of firewood, which is defined as more than 3 bundles, at least 50 miles back in 2006. But with her sustained outreach campaign that took place at parks, via social media, billboards, etc., she now sees when she is polling the public that people move firewood closer to 20 miles. So she's seen more than a half reduction in the distance people move this firewood. So she has changed this behavior in her state through her outreach. It's a really powerful example of actually getting things done through outreach, which sometimes can be a little bit difficult to prove. So we've got some lively discussion on the right talking about where people are following social media. Like FACnet currently has professional followers in Twitter around 300, and that's a very good start. Twitter, it's very difficult to build a base. It happens gradually. You can't buy your friends there, that's for sure. And then on Facebook, Wendy does add that the presence is attracting both professionals and public. That's fairly typical. That's what we see on Facebook as well for the Don't Move Firewood presence. And let's see, what Annie is adding is during an event. Now, I don't have events of note, by the way, so I'm not an event information source. So I'm interested to see that during the event, people really use family and friends, newspapers and television, which makes sense. And I wonder if that family and friends can be exploited in a positive way. If your family and your friends are getting their information from Facebook, are you really getting your information from family and friends, or are you really getting it from Facebook? So making sure that individuals in your community are informed might actually be the way to spread it sort of virally about appropriate information. So that's something to take into account. So Emily asked me to cover just a couple behavior change messaging basics for anybody who is new or wanted a little bit of a tune-up on their social media. Now, I wrote down the results of the first poll, and it looked to me like 2/3 of you already maintain some sort of Facebook presence for interfacing either with the public or with professionals. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that one was with the public, excuse me. And then 1/3 of you maintain a Twitter presence for interfacing with the public. And then in terms of interfacing with your colleagues specifically, it's half of you have a Facebook account that you use for that purpose, and 1/4 of you roughly have a Twitter account. So a lot of you are already practicing these in some way, although it's not everyone. So if it had been full, if everybody had checked that off, I might have skipped quickly through these slides, but it sounds like this will still be pretty productive for everyone. So, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. I wanted to start, before I get into this awesome graphic on social media do's and don'ts, about relentless positivity, which is a funny phrase. But if anybody is familiar with Facebook, it's almost impossible to avoid George Takei, which I always thought was pronounced Takai, but it's not, apparently. It's pronounced Takei. So George Takei is Sulu from Star Trek was his most popular role, but now he is just a really impressive campaigner for a lot of different social rights and so forth. His Facebook presence is almost entirely consists of positive and funny messages, and it's one of the most popular ones on the internet. And it's an important take-home lesson. People do not generally log onto Facebook to become depressed about their lives. They want to see something that entertains them or that educates them, that makes them happy, or gives them the information they want. Citing negative statistics will get you very less followers and very fewer engaged people than citing positive. Things that people can clap for and get behind and like. I mean, you may notice, even with Facebook's new developments this week, they still haven't created a dislike button for many reasons, I'm sure. But that relentless flow of positive energy coming off of George Takei's account is what makes him so popular. So we can't all be positive. Some of the stuff that we post is negative. It's sad, it's destructive, it's depressing, it's bad news, whatever. But you cannot linger on those things. So in order to avoid being negative all the time, one of the things that you can do is provide, number one bullet on this slide, the clear and doable call to action. So if you're going to be presenting something that is depressing or frustrating or sad or negative, you need to provide people with their call to action. Give them some hope, give them something to do that makes them take that negative moment and frame it back up into the positive. That way you will maintain your followers. People will like reading your posts as opposed to avoiding you because you're a downer, etc. A lot of this seems a little bit like it's sort of trivializing the emotions of your followers, but you have to remember that we live in essentially a curated society, right? Everybody's putting on their face for social media, and we too have to put on our faces for social media to make sure that people are getting information they need, but in a way that they can actually absorb it instead of tuning it out and trying to avoid it to protect themselves emotionally, or even just not wanting to admit that they have to take these actions. So these clear and doable calls to action need to be part of either the text that's above the image or within the image itself. This example here that I gave of a partner campaign that I work with, but I don't actually generate the social media, it says, they're enjoying the great outdoors, but you want to keep the pests from spreading. Then they give their clear call to action. You should be washing your tires and wheel wells before going and returning. And then they tell people to share, which is smart because people are obedient, generally speaking. So people are going to read that and be like, you're right, I should share. And they'll share the post. Excuse me. And then they have this image that really grabs them of the giant killer gypsy moth caterpillar eating the top of the RV, which is hilarious. And that really gets their eye. So when you have these clear actions that are called for, then you can follow that up with the really gripping imagery. Now, obviously, not all of us have an artist on staff that can make stuff like this, but You don't have to have an artist on staff. You can also just have pictures. This is a great example of a different campaign that I think does a good job of manipulating their pictures that aren't extremely noteworthy. I mean, it's just a guy duck hunting, but they take it and they make it into something that works on social media. So they've got their call to action. They've got a description in the words. The only thing, in my opinion, that they're missing is the reminder to share. But of course, if you do that on every single post, it gets really repetitive, so you have to kind of mix it up. So those are two examples of social media posts that contain elements that really help you make sure people look at your post and sometimes share it, and definitely don't unlike or dislike your account, which is sort of your death knell when they turn you back off. Either by ignoring you consistently, so much so that you end up getting lowered down on the algorithm, or by actually literally unfollowing your account. I wanted to finish up my presentation with an interesting, non-anecdote, but sort of incident I had recently. I had, on almost a whim, I decided to take an old post and modify it a little bit and then sponsor it. I don't actually have an advertising budget right now, which is a problem, but you know, it is what it is. So I put $25 on this post on the right, and it got 40 shares, as opposed to the post on the left, which was about 2 months earlier that I didn't put any money under, so I didn't sponsor it, and it only got 8 shares. Two interesting things happened with that $25. One is the 40 shares, which was pretty darn interesting to me, as well as the number of people that liked it. So the one on the left is 18 people, and the one on the right is 95 people. That's a pretty impressive difference. But then the other thing that's interesting is that I got a lot more engagement from people actually commenting on the one on the right. Now, comments are usually positive. Some of these are a little random, which is fine. But the comments themselves increase the chance that your post gets placed on the feed of other people. So it's almost falling down. I'm forgetting the metaphor I'm looking for, but it's kind of rolling down a hill of, you know, you get started, you sponsor it, and then interestingly, people comment. And then the comments themselves increase your ranking in the algorithm, and then the comments themselves increase the chance that other people's pages see it, and it gets better and better, and it sort of snowballs. So if you have a budget for advertising, I think this is a good illustration of how to get better reach for actually fairly minimal input. As a result of this experiment, I am trying to get more money for advertising on Facebook for sponsoring Facebook posts, which is the form of advertising I think is most effective, because I think that this shows that I get a lot more for my effort if I can put some advertising dollar behind it. Yes, Emily has an outstanding point, which is that even if it feels a little bit like preaching to the choir, liking and commenting positively on their posts really helps your partners be seen by more partners. So your minimal effort of being like, great job, Emily, on Facebook, or, you know, commenting on somebody else's site, or even just liking it, it greatly increases the number of people that see it. So that's an easy way for you to help the big team without putting in hardly any effort on your own side. You might feel a little silly doing it, but we all know why we're doing it. We're all doing it so that more people see this stuff. So you don't feel too weird about it. You know, if I work with a contractor, and one of my contractor likes every one of my posts. For a while, I couldn't figure out why she was doing it. She's doing it because she knows it'll be seen by more people, and so she's trying to help me, and she doesn't care that she has to like every one of my posts. So, you know, it's a good way to help somebody with almost no effort whatsoever. Oh, that's my thank you slide. So actually, I'm going to leave it on this one because there's some interesting information on it, and I'm going to make sure that everybody who wanted to input a question on the chat box or make their opinion heard has the next, 7 minutes of time to do so. So there you go. So Emily is mentioning that there's an app on Podio that lists out everybody's social media account. So make sure your page is up to date on there, and then also go follow them if it makes sense for you to follow them. And for anybody who doesn't have a social media account, that's a great point that you could use this as a learning opportunity to see what other people are doing and make a smart decision about whether or not you should change tracks and actually start engaging on social media. And Annie, thanks. I'm glad it was really interesting to you.
Thank you so much, Leigh. I just want to point out that Leigh will be our CODA fellow for a little while longer, and she's on the Podio space, and we have her email. So please feel free to reach out if you think of any questions later on. And she's a really great resource. She's got a lot of knowledge about social media, and I know that we, as FACnet staff, have learned a lot from her. So thank you very much, Leigh. Wendy is asking if anybody else wants to share a social media success story really quickly. We have about 5 minutes. The first one I can think of is, Annie, I think last year you had some good success with your to-go bag campaign that you ran on Facebook, I believe. I don't know if you have any lessons learned or thoughts after that, if you're still on the phone.
Well, even though, if she is, I was going to jump in. Something like a to-go bag is an amazing example of a call to action that is doable. I mean, it's a fantastic thing to be pushing out from social media.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, we tried to make a Kit Monday campaign, and what ended up being, I think, the most fun. I don't know if Becca's still on from Southwest Colorado, but we ended up kind of doing it together where we both dispersed the load and also shared. So she would post one week and we would share it, and then we would post one week and they would share it. And that seemed to increase our statistics, both in terms of likes and shares and comments. We found that when we shared pictures or local resources, we got more local engagement, which kind of stands to reason. But you know, it was an interesting exercise for us, and I think it would be easy to sort of preload, I guess. You can schedule those. You could do a whole bunch of them at once and schedule them for every Monday or every Wednesday, and it kind of helps keep your account active without it necessarily having to be super real-time information.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. And Becca brings up a good point that the sharing of posts was fun and helpful, but next time they need to frame it out up front a little bit better. And I know one thing that we have for our blog is an editorial calendar, and we try to be really consistent with posting every Tuesday and Thursday. And you can see on our Twitter and our Facebook and our website analytics that we get a huge increase and spike in numbers every Tuesday and Thursday because we post consistently and people know to look for it. And there are lots of planning, software and apps and stuff available on the web to help you create social media calendars. And it does take a little, thinking and planning, but I think when you run campaigns like that, it does make your life a little bit easier. And one quick question from Liz Rank. She asked, are we getting to the point where some social media presence is necessary for credibility, i.e. you pretty much have to have a web page now? It's as basic as a phone. And Wendy says, I think the answer is yes, but I would agree with that, that it's kind of expected that, organizations are on at least one avenue of social media. And Leigh is also agreeing that the answer is increasingly yes. So we have about 2 minutes left, so I just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much to everybody for joining, and thank you immensely to our presenters, Ashley and Karuna and Leigh, who took time out of their schedule to think about this and prepare great presentations for you all.